I get to talk about Gear 5th today. Yay! So, time for the last Kaido video. And as where we left off with the last one, it was Kaido had just defeated Luffy and had knocked him off of Onigashima. And Kaido's just like, I guess you couldn't be Joy Boy either. So we're going to pick up from there. But first, given some of the stuff that we learned in the chapters recently in regards to Kaido, more like his past and stuff like that with the Rocks Pirates, I did want to address it, considering that, you know, this is coming out like the week or two after that. So we're getting the Rocks Loki Harold flashbacks right now, however we want to set that up. We're getting those flashbacks right now, that backstory. And what ends up happening is, of course, in the backstory at the end of 1156, we have it that, you know, the Rocks Pirates have fully formed, or mostly fully formed, and, you know, Rocks is, you know, telling him about his plan, and, you know, we have to find this devil fruit and this devil fruit and all of that stuff. And what we see Kaido there, and he is like the youngest of all of them. He is the rookie. He is the one who is the apprentice pirate, the cabin boy, however you want to put it. The way that like Shanks and Buggy were on Roger's ship, or the way that a lot of people thought that Momonosuke or Tama were going to be for Luffy and the Straw Hats. And Kaido is like this young upstart in their regard, because the rest of them have all been pirates for quite a while, because Kaido was like 15, 16 or so during that part of the flashback that we're seeing 44 years ago. And we, of course, have it that Rocks is going off about, like, and, you know, when we need this specific devil fruit, and we need Harold to eat it to, like, supposedly fully awaken whatever it is, or to use it to the best extent. What that devil fruit is, as of the moment of this recording, we don't know. But Kaido's just like, well, with all this power that we have here, with like all these heavy hitters that we have here on the crew, why don't we just go and force him to eat it and force him to join us? And I like how Rocks just like straight up just like kicks Kaido across the floor, and it's just like, no, we're not doing that. Harold's my friend. I'm not going to force him to do this. I want him to do this because he wants to. And like Kaido, I don't think Kaido ever quite gets that through his head, because subsequently, pretty much what we have seen him do when it comes to people who are part of his crew is that they are part of his crew because it's like, oh, winner takes all. It's the strongest is the one that is in charge. And that's the way that Kaido views it, and that's the way that his crew tends to operate. That's why he has so many, you know, defeated pirate captains and stuff like that as part of his crew. That's the way it is for several of the Toby Roppo. That's the way it was for Apu and Hawkins, although Apu was like willingly working for Kaido, and Hawkins was like, okay, I'm going to do this because I'd rather live than be beaten up right now. And we see that. And, you know, that's, you know, might makes right in Kaido's eyes. And that's one of the things that is going to get touched upon in this video. And, you know, touched upon later in this video when it's during the Gear 5th climax between Luffy and Kaido during their final clash. So, going into that, going away from the past and more toward the more recent present. So, as I said, we left it where Kaido had defeated Luffy, knocked him off the top of Onigashima, and he's falling and falling and falling. Luffy will fall into the Wano Sea, will get found by the Polar Tang, will get saved by Law's crew, taken to the shore, fed, thanks to Caribou, sadly, who could have a Rocks Pirate connection. We don't know. He could be, you know, a Choco's son or something like that. We don't know. All that happens, Momonosuke and Shinobu show up, and then blah, 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 blah. While all of that is happening, up on the roof, we have it that Kaido has Bao Wang make this announcement. Or, Kaido is told by Bowing where Momonosuke currently is, and that's in one of like the attic spaces in Onigashima in the mansion. So Kaido's intention is to go there and try to take out Momonosuke. On his way there, he doesn't really come into much resistance. And he comes, he finds Momonosuke, Kinemon, Shinobu, and Kiku. Also, the defeated Kanjuro. And what ends up happening is Momonosuke and Shinobu manage to escape. They end up escaping through like one of the giant holes that Big Mom made in the castle. And they're able to escape, where they will go end up meeting up with Luffy, which will come back later. And Kaido then, Kinemon is now the one standing in Kaido's way to a degree. And Kaido's just like, okay, I'm done dealing with you. Picks up his Kanabo, just has it completely coated with, his Supreme King Haki, and then just strikes through Kinemon, breaks Kinemon's swords, and is just like pounded through the floor. Actually, Shinobu and Momonosuke are there to witness this, but then they manage to escape. So yeah, Kinemon gets, to be fair, I don't think anyone would have been surprised if Kinemon died here, but as I've already gone over in the Kinemon video for Onigashima, he doesn't die here. He ends up being fine. From there, we have it that Kaido then hears, Kaido is just like, not happy with this. Kinemon barely survives this attack, so Kaido just picks up one of, like, the broken swords from the ground and impales Kinemon with that. Then Kaido goes off to try to pursue Momonosuke and Shinobu, which they have, of course, thankfully escaped already and are floating down to the island. What then happens is Kaido hears someone calling him, and he looks up and he sees through one of the holes in the roof, he sees Yamato up on the roof. And Yamato is there and demanding to fight. And Kaido's like, fine, I got nothing better to do right now. My prey went that way. I can easily find it later. Kaido goes back up to the roof, where then the fight on top of the Skull Dome continues, now with Yamato stepping in. And this is where we get to see more of the extent of Yamato's Devil Fruit abilities. Finding out that he has the Okuchi no Makami, and that he has like ice powers that go with it, and we see the two of them continue to clash and have very similar fighting styles, because Yamato also fights with a Kanabo the same way that Kaido does. And we see them clashing, and Yamato is able to do some damage to Kaido. Kaido's unfortunately doing a good chunk of damage to Yamato, and they're going back and forth, and Kaido is just like mocking Yamato for just how much Yamato has like rebelled against him, and insisting that Yamato should just give up and become the Shogun of Wano, the way that Kaido had planned. Because the intention for the new Onigashima project, as I kind of touched on in the last video, is of course in the previous one for this, was to move Onigashima from its spot, move it to the flower capital, drop it on the flower capital, and then have it be that Yamato becomes the new Shogun of Wano. Part of that is Yamato, because of the handcuffs at the time, could still not leave the boundaries of Onigashima, so Kaido's like, okay, well, I'll just move the island and put Yamato in charge of Wano, from the flower capital, or from the former flower capital, destroyed flower capital, this way. Obviously, we all know that does not happen, and Yamato is very much against this idea, because Yamato does not want to rule over those citizens of Wano. He wants to help them. He wants to free them from Kaido. And, he just, he keeps, declaring his intentions, his alliance with Luffy and everything else like that, which is, of course, just annoying to Kaido. All of that stuff. So we have this going back and forth. We have Kaido going into his human beast form, clashing with Yamato and his human beast, his hybrid form, them going back and forth and everything else like that. And, Kaido is, just trying to literally beat submission into Yamato during this battle. Doesn't end up happening. But this is, of course, where we find out about how Yamato ended up with his devil fruit, with the Inu no Mi model Okuchi no Makami. And this was probably shortly after Yamato had ended up escaping the cave because he was so hungry. He found his way to where the devil fruit was and he ate it, which of course angered Kaido because he'd been saving that devil fruit for someone that he probably would be able to assure the loyalty of in regards to controlling Wano. And what ends up happening is they're just clashing back and forth, so we get some great stuff there. Eventually, more of this clashing is happening. And Yamato is unfortunately taking a good bit of damage. They are getting a bunch of damage in on Kaido as well, thankfully, but it's still, all this stuff. Kaido just hates the idea of Yamato helping the samurai and freeing Wano and all of that stuff. As they keep clashing back and forth. During this part, we're getting to see some of Yamato's abilities with the ice ability and just how strong he is in that regard, at using some of these various different techniques that he's developed over the years. So we get to see a lot of that. It's good back and forth. What then ends up happening eventually is just out of nowhere, well, seemingly from out of nowhere for them, giant pink dragon comes out of the sky. Just appears out of the sky with Luffy riding on top of it. Luffy riding on its head. And this is, of course, grown-up Momonosuke has been aged up by Shinobu using her ripe abilities. And they have shown up at the battle. They have returned to the Battle of Onigashima. Luffy has re-energized himself after scarfing down all of the food from Caribou, and has, they're amped up and ready to fight, and they get there, and Luffy jumps down, releasing this very strong attack onto Kaido, combined with an attack from Yamato that does kind of send Kaido flying, which is good. And then we have it that Momonosuke gets in an attack. It's not like a giant Boro Breath on Kaido, to be fair. I don't think Kaido's Boro Breath would have been, or, Momonosuke's Boro Breath would have been enough to cause a huge amount of damage to Kaido, but it may have at least, singed some fur. But what Kaido does, or what Yamato does, is, let me try that again. What Momonosuke does is just bites Kaido, which is great. Just bites Kaido, and which does cause Kaido some pain, because it's hey, he's being bitten by another dragon, as thick as his scales are. Momonosuke should, to a degree, have very similar physical stats at this point in time. Not so much experience, but similar physical stats. And so Yamato bites him, or why do I keep saying Yamato? Momonosuke bites Kaido. Luffy and Yamato attack Kaido, and then Yamato and Momonosuke end up going off to go do something else. Well, eventually they're going to end up trying to stop Onigashima from landing on the Flower Capital, and that's what they're going to be working on for a good chunk of this fight. And what ends up happening is now we're back to Luffy and Kaido up on the roof fighting against each other. And so they're going back and forth again. Luffy has kind of figured out a better way of using his, his advanced Conqueror's Haki with, with coding, with everything else like that, being able to fight like that. We get some more really good clashes here. And the other thing that we get here is where we start to have Kaido go into his various types of drunk forms, which is just funny. So we've got Luffy just like sending all these different attacks at Kaido, and Kaido is of course still drinking during all of these different attacks. So Kaido starts to go into his various types of drunk. So there is the sad drunk, there is flirty drunk, there is happy drunk. Were there only 4 or 5? And then I know that there's like the homicidal maniac drunk that he goes into that's just like the just like him, just oh god, Psycho Kaido. As he's going back and forth, clashing against Luffy and everything else like that. Like him going into like the flirty drunk is just funny. It's like he's sad because like you're destroying my house, and then he's trying to flirt with Luffy to get him to stop. I do kind of wonder if, given the fact that like they had Stussy and Gloriosa and Big Mom on the crew with him when they were part of the Rocks crew, I kind of wonder if there were times where any of the 3 of them, probably specifically Gloriosa, would just start flirting with her opponent to throw them off, and Kaido picked up on that, and then just whenever he's a certain level of drunk, he just does that, which is just funny. And I wonder how often that worked. I wonder if that's how he got Yamato. Fighting against a girl, went into flirty mode. The girl's like, sure. Kaido, wait, what? Huh? What am I supposed to do now? Type of a thing. And so we get that. We get him jumping through all these different drunk variations of him as Luffy and him are continuing to fight. And so it's just, you know, there's other things going on at the same time. There's another moment in here where it also coincides with the fight between Kid, Law, and Big Mom. Happens at some point in time during this battle. Kid, Law, and Big Mom. Kid and Law managed to defeat Big Mom and send her through the hole and into the volcano. And Kaido just... like, he's kind of... It's... As we saw in some of the flashback stuff with Kaido and Big Mom while they were on the Rocks Pirates, Big Mom did kind of become somewhat of a big sister figure to Kaido. She kind of took him under her wing. And, you know, they had semi-version of that sibling relationship. Which, to a degree, from Big Mom's perspective, she was probably missing since, you know, all of the kids at the, you know, Sheep's house are gone after what happened there. She was probably missing that dynamic, and having Kaido there was kind of someone that she could connect with in that regard. Similar thing may have happened to some of the other Rocks Pirates members, but Kaido's the main one that we know of. But even Kaido's kind of, you know, somewhat, you know, sad, kind of morose that Big Mom got defeated. So he's still kind of upset about that. During all of this time frame, of course, Luffy is going through his Gear 2nd and 3rd moves, actually, surprisingly enough, causing damage to Kaido. You know, by using his Supreme King Haki infused, you know, bolstered versions of those attacks. So he is causing damage to Kaido. Again, it's like the same thing that like we kept pointing out, that were pointed out by other reviewers during these chapters as they were happening. It's just like Kaido's health bar is like trying to fight like the final boss in a video game. It's just like so big, and it's just like you can keep chipping away at it, you can do some super effective damage on it, but just given how big that freaking HP bar is, or how many HP bars you got to go through before you get down to the last one, and you just got to whittle away at them. And as I pointed out in the previous video, it's like this power bar, this health bar has been whittled away at. You know, the Scabbards got good hits in on Kaido that kind of started to, you know, get that through. Luffy, Kid, Law, Killer, Zoro, all of them got really good hits in on Kaido at various points during the initial battle up on top of the Skull Dome with the, you know, with them. They also got attacks in on Big Mom. Again, Big Mom is also the similar thing where it's just like, you just, with how strong she is, you just gotta whittle away at her. Kaido more so, but Big Mom did have that too, and like Kid and Law managed to pull that off. during their fight with her and like figure out her weaknesses and stuff like that with Law and like the R room. And then like with Kaido, it's like it's been the Scabbards, it's been the Worst Generation, and then it was Luffy on his own, then it was Yamato, you know, chipping away at him. Momonosuke got in, you know, a bite there to cause some damage to Kaido. And now we're back to Luffy. You know, after he's kind of figured out how to use like the Supreme King infused hockey for his punches and kicks and stuff like that, figured out how to use that even better than before, along with the Ryo techniques. He's using those to be able to actually cause more damage to Kaido while using up less of his energy by just using his Gear 2nd and 3rd forms instead of his Gear 4th forms at this point in time. He's still using Gear 4th every now and then during this fight, but mostly it's focusing on those two for the time being so he can do more attacks and not run out of energy as fast. So, you know, we have him using Gamu Gamu no Hydra and so many other various attacks that he's using against Kaido. And he's, you know, actually causing more damage to be chipped away at Kaido's, you know, health bar, essentially. On top of this, Kaido is also just using a good chunk of stamina in order to use the island clouds, the flame clouds, to lift Onigashima and carry it to the flower capital. So he's using a good chunk of stamina while doing that, as well as on top of battling, on top of all the fights. So it's like a lot of that stuff combined together is what's wearing Kaido down. What then ends up happening is we have it that the battle gets interrupted. Luffy has gone into his Gear 4th form, and he is just like focusing as much of his hockey and as much of his energy as he can into this strike. And he ends up, you know, getting ready to, I think he's going to use his Over Kong gun on the Emperor. And Kaido's getting ready to do a Boro Blast. And what ends up happening is, you know, Kaido's kind of going into like the homicidal form that he goes, the homicidal drunk form that he goes into, getting ready to attack Luffy as they're, you know, raring up to hit each other. And this is when the battle gets interrupted. Luffy is getting ready to hit Kaido. They're closing in on each other. And then Guernica pops up, the CP0 agent that we have seen. Pops up, grabs Luffy's shoulder, you know, distracting him long enough for Kaido to not be able to... It's like it's fast enough that Kaido sees what happens, realizes what's happening, but he can't stop his attack from going through. So he slams his Kanabo fully into Luffy, as, you know, was Guernica's intention. And this results in Luffy just getting slammed down onto the roof at full force from the Kanabo with this really strong attack from Kaido. And Guernica is standing there, pretty much accepting his own fate. Because it's just like, hey, you're the one that did this. You're the one that interrupted a battle with Kaido against an opponent that he was actually enjoying fighting. That's the other thing about this fight, is that Kaido is actually, to a degree, enjoying this battle, enjoying fighting Luffy. Because the thing is that, you know, way back at the beginning of this, when, you know, Luffy first showed up on the roof and everything like that, Kaido kind of saw the similarities between him and Rox and Roger and Shanks and Whitebeard. Those other ones that, you know, that he respected, even if he, you know, didn't necessarily like them all the time, he respected them. They earned Kaido's respect. And Rox was one of those people. And given what we're seeing during this backstory, we now have more context for how Rox acted, for the kind of person that Rox was. And a lot of people are making, you know, comparisons between Rox and Luffy. Back when, you know, when I first started doing these ones, we didn't have that information about Rox yet, so I couldn't have that full context. We just thought Rox was kind of insane. To a degree, we're not wrong on that one, but given more context of what we've seen of him and, you know, his planning and all this other stuff, he doesn't seem to be as we thought. as much around the bend as we thought he was. He's still crazy, definitely, given what he wants to do. But the thing is Luffy also can qualify as being crazy given what he wants to do with becoming king of the pirates and then whatever the other thing is that he wants to do after that. To a degree, in this world, in the One Piece world, if you want to do anything that involves having to be a pirate, you're kind of crazy given all the obstacles that you are going to be up against with not just the Marines, but bounty hunters and other pirates throughout the course. Plus, just like the world itself is kind of against you, like physically against you at that point in time when it comes to like the Grand Line and all of that. With the paradise and the new world and all of that stuff, just like navigating all of that is just don't do that. And Rocks, Kaido looked at Rocks and was just kind of like, this guy's got something. I'm not sure what it is, but he's got something. And again, there's like the whole question of how much of like about Emu did Rocks tell the others? Did Rocks tell his crew? Did he tell them, oh yeah, I made it all the way up to Marie Joie? I mean, they would have known about that because he killed a admiral at killed an admiral while at Reverie, along with whatever happens with those 5 kings. Pretty sure they're dead. But from what we saw, he made his way to the flower room and he found Emu. How much of that did he explain to them? So, or like Kaido, Big Mom, Whitebeard, and all the rest of them, like, okay, well, Rox's plan kind of got foiled and we kind of lost some of those devil fruits that he was looking for. And none of us are friends with Harold, so that's not going to happen anyway. So what are we going to do next? So they all just went their own separate ways. But there is comparisons to be made between Rox and Luffy with like their ambition and such, as we've seen. We'll probably get more of those comparisons as like a comparison between like Rox and Blackbeard and Rox and Luffy. But what ends up happening is, Kaido was actually enjoying this fight with Luffy. He hasn't really enjoyed a fight this much in a long time. Like, maybe he to a degree enjoyed clashing with Moria, 23 years ago or whenever when that happened. Maybe whatever type of a skirmish they had with Shanks on the way to Marineford, something with that happened that he enjoyed. Maybe, it's like, it's probably making him, like, think back on, like, his days as a Rocks pirate, where he was the one who wasn't the strongest, where there were all of these other heavy hitters on the crew, and he was the freaking rookie. He was the one who was just learning all of this stuff. He was the one who either hadn't really been on any other pirate crews, hadn't been either a captain of their own crew at some point in time, up to that point, or, some variation of that. And he's really enjoying this fight with Luffy. And Guernica shows up and has interrupted it and has prematurely brought this fight to an end. And Kaido is not happy about this. So, he... pretty sure Guernica is dead at this point in time. Kaido just looks over at Guernica, picks up his Kanabo. Guernica is just kind of like, yeah, I know I'm dead now. And just, like, accepts his fate. And then Kaido just, BAM! With his Kanabo, with his Saikai, right onto Guernica. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Guernica's dead at this point in time. And what ends up happening is, so Guernica has been dispatched. He's down. He's out. Luffy has unfortunately been very badly hit during this attack. And Kaido doesn't like this because it's very similar to what happened when he fought, Odin all those years ago, 20 years ago. It's very similar to that battle where Higurashi interrupted the battle by pretending to be Momonosuke and using that as a hostage situation to get, to distract Odin. Which, of course, led to, Kaido being able to hit Odin and then realizing what happened and then not liking it and, ending Higurashi. And, that's lived with him for the past 20 years. And now this same thing has just happened again with Guernica showing up. So Guernica gets to pay the price for that. From there, we have it that, like, the narrator comes on and has declared Kaido the winner of the battle on the roof of Onigashima and Luffy the loser. And so we have that moment. From there, Kaido turns into his dragon form, flies down, puts his head essentially through the giant hole in the ceiling into the live stage area where a bunch of, that's where like a ton of the beast pirates are, the samurais, a lot of the straw hats are in there, Nami and the others are in there. Nami, Tama, Marco, a bunch of the other ones are in there. And, a lot of the other battles have finished up at this point in time, or some of them are like coming to a head, with like Sanji and Queen and Zoro and King and stuff like that. So like stuff's kind of coming to a head at this point in time. Either the battles are finishing up or they have already ended. For a lot of these different ones. I don't remember the exact lineup for stuff, but that's kind of what happens. And Kaido is like telling them all that Luffy is dead. And they're like, oh no, and he's demanding that Momonosuke surrender to him. And all the samurai are like, no. And all the beast pirates that are still loyal to Kaido are like, yeah. And like the samurai and the others are just like, no, this can't be it, essentially. And Nami, another reason I love Nami, she's the one who stops. She's the one who starts yelling at Kaido. Of like, that's not true. Luffy wouldn't lose to someone like you. Not like this. And like, she's like chewing out Kaido, and I love that. And Kaido just straight up Boro breasts her. Thankfully, Marco's there to protect her and Tama. But Nami is the one who like, oh no, that's not happening. Luffy is not dead. And she is correct. And what ends up happening is, of course, there starts to be this drum beat that starts pulsating. And Kaido feels this drum beat. And what ends up happening is, like, it's kind of like echoing throughout Onigashima, or at the very least throughout that area, and Kaido hears it and feels it. And right at that point in time, giant hand comes out, grabs him, and this yanks him through the hole in the roof. Which leads me to why I have the specific thumbnail for this, with what I refer to as the mommy shot from Kaido. Because this is where we enter Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry territory for how Luffy fights Kaido here with his Gear 5th. And I am so happy about this, because as many different times already as I have talked about the Battle of Onigashima through the eyes of the Scabbards, through the eyes of the Yakuza, through the eyes of Big Mom, now through Kaido here, and I actually get to talk about this through the eyes of Momonosuke when I get to that. Same thing with Hiyori, same thing with Tama, not quite Toko, but you get the idea. With the other ones that I'll be talking about, along with the ones that I've already talked about, it's like I haven't gotten to talk about this one, because none of the Scabbards are involved in this fight, so I wouldn't have mentioned it here. For Hiyori, I'll mention it tangentially when I get to her. Momonosuke is going to see part of this, which I will get to when I do his videos. And, so all of that stuff. But, like, Kaido's the one that's here fighting Luffy. He's the one who's experiencing this. And it goes literal Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry type rubber hose animation with, like, just, like, that level of, like, how they can just, like, how did they survive that? I don't know, but they did type of thing. And I love that. I'm quite certain someone could quite easily just take, like, the Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers sound effects, Goofy Sounds library, and just, like, edit that into the fight here, and it would work fine for, like, this fight here between Luffy and Kaido, for all the frickin' weird shit that Luffy manages to do. And the bit that I love, that is just like one of my favorite moments in One Piece, and also what I consider one of the funniest moments from my perspective, is the mommy moment where Kaido gets yanked by Luffy, and it's where his eyes just go, oh. It's not this moment, but it's later when they're on the roof, and I just love that moment where Kaido's like, oh, I'm fucked when that happens. So what happens is Kaido gets yanked through the roof by Luffy, and he gets pulled up and is pulled out and is pulled up through the hole, slammed down on the ground, is looking at Luffy, and is seeing Luffy just, something is off here. Something is definitely different about what's going on here compared to, like, I don't know, not even 10 minutes ago, but like a couple of minutes ago when I was up here. And Luffy has still grabbed Kaido, and he proceeds to swing him around and then bang him into the ground, very similar to what Hulk does with Loki and Avengers. Just like swing and bangs him into the ground on the top of the Skull Dome, which is just hilarious, and I love that bit. And Kaido is just so confused, A, as to what the F is happening here. B, he's confused as to how Luffy is so happy and how he even survived what just happened. And, so we get a bunch of that. And what ends up happening after that is, of course, Kaido Boro breasts Luffy again. But this is where Luffy, picks up the ground, bends the ground up and, reverses the attack back at Kaido. And this is where we get the mommy frame where it's just like the Boro breath coming back at Kaido. It's just like, oh, that's not good moment. And he just gets attacked with that. And then he apologizes to Luffy. After he recovers, he apologizes to Luffy for Guernica interrupting them. And the two of them then prepare to continue this fight. During this time, Luffy is just bouncing up and down all over the place. Kaido at one point in time makes the comparison to Luffy being like a cartoon, like a comic strip, that what they have in the newspaper. And Kaido also makes the comment that, like, the way that Luffy has changed isn't the way that, like, a Paramecia would change. It's more the way that a Zoan would change, which confuses him, which is fair, because it confused all of us as well when all of this was happening. And of course, during this time frame, we're getting, like, the conversation with the Gorosei in the manga, and in the anime, we're getting the conversation with the Gorosei where we're getting the reveal that, no, the Gummy Gummy no Mi is not a Paramecia per se, not exactly, and it's actually not called the Gummy Gummy no Mi, it's actually called the Hito Hito no Mi model Sun God Nika. And it allows the person who ate it, once they actually awaken it, to become Nika, to gain Nika's abilities. And that is, of course, what is happening with Luffy here. So, Luffy and Kaido are continuing this giant fight. Luffy is using a bunch of different new techniques that he hasn't been able to do before because he's just coming up with them now, along with adjusting some of his old techniques for what he can do now. And we have various things, because Kaido at one point in time tries to, bites Luffy and tries to swallow him, and Luffy, blows himself up in Kaido's stomach and his neck, which is just funny. He, opens Kaido's mouth by reaching out through his eyes and opening his mouth that way. He turns Kaido into a jump rope, which is just funny. So we get all of these different things where it's just Kaido going like, how the heck did I end up in this situation? Type of a thing. As, Luffy is just causing so much damage to Kaido in this regard. Not that Luffy is not sustaining damage himself, because, he's still getting bit by Kaido, or he's still getting hit with a Boro breath, or different things like that. But Luffy is actually being able to cause a lot of damage to Kaido during this time frame. And, so we're getting a lot of that stuff. And even, Kaido getting, his head slammed in the, through the, live floor and different things like that. Getting, moved around and all this other stuff as, Luffy is just having fun with him. And after all this stuff is going back after all of this stuff is just like, Kaido is like, what the heck is happening? But he's kind of having fun again, but he's also like, ow, type of a thing. So, and, so it's just like they're going through a ton of that. Like, it's just this, blow after blow after blow of Luffy hitting Kaido and Kaido trying to hit Luffy and either getting it bounced back at him or Luffy just, funnily enough, getting out of it one way or the other. We also have it where Luffy literally, jumps into the clouds and grabs lightning, makes it tangible and then hits Kaido with that. Or where Luffy goes into like his giant form and does something there while Kaido is continuing to fight Luffy. And we also have the moment where Kaido literally like picks himself up, like is like, okay, tell me who you are, because like Luffy is kind of changing there this time from, and Luffy again just says, no, I'm Luffy, I'm Monkey D. Luffy, I'm gonna be king of the pirates. It's still Luffy. And, that he will surpass Kaido. He will become king of the pirates. And Kaido's like, okay, you haven't lost your spirit. However, your powers are just effing ridiculous. And, like, so we get this continuation here of them, attack, back and forth and back and forth. And what ends up happening is eventually we get to the climax of the battle where Kaido it's like okay, it's gonna come down to one last hit from both of us. Luffy has just like, his whatever the King Kong gun is, whatever that he makes, and Gamu no Kaminari, or whatever the heck whatever the attack is that Luffy uses to like, get his fist giant Bajra gun is I think what he uses. And Kaido gathers up his attack and he is he turns himself into his dragon form, and then he is using his power to essentially make this giant like fire magma version of himself. That is, we have Luffy here, Kaido here, and then Momonosuke with Onigashima trying to pull it out of the way over here. And, if Luffy hits Kaido, they're going to hit, Onigashima, which is not good. So Luffy is telling Momonosuke that he has to get Onigashima out of there. And we're having this moment where I kind of call it the clash of ideals that we have with Kaido and Luffy, where Luffy wants to be able to allow the citizens of Wano freedom, to free them from Kaido, to free them from this oppression that Orochi and Kaido have put them through. And to be, comparison here, while this is going on, we also have the battle, or the essentially mental battle of Hiyori versus Orochi going on at the same time, down in, somewhere in the mansion of Onigashima and Kaido's mansion. We have that same parallel going on there. Which I mention here, and I'll mention, vice versa. It's like this climax thing here because they're happening at the same time in the chapters and they happen at the same time in the episodes. But, like, so, it's like this conclusion as to what's going on. It's, Luffy is, gathering up his strength, getting ready to defeat Kaido. And Kaido is just going off about, like, no, the weak deserve to be ruled over or not exist, or they live to serve the strong, is the way that Kaido is doing it. And Luffy's like, no, that's not the way that it should work, type of thing. So we have, like, this clashing of ideals between the two of them. And then we have this just great, epic way that the battle ends, which Oda's gonna have to come up with a way to top it in the end of at the end of whatever the final battle is for One Piece. And Luffy just has his fist coming toward Kaido, and Kaido has like his magma dragon set up, and his intention is not to dodge, and like Luffy is like punching through the magma dragon essentially, and hits Kaido at whatever his full force is at this point in time. Full, as strong as Conqueror's Haki, Armament Haki, all of that stuff, Ryuo, all of that is like hitting Kaido. And in the anime and in the manga, this is where we're kind of getting like the Kaido backstory a little bit at the same time. This like flashbacks here with that, just to kind of fill in some gaps for Kaido. And what ends up happening is, of course, Kaido gets hit and he falls. Momonosuke managed to move Onigashima in time, so Kaido's not going to hit into Onigashima, he's going to crash into Onigashima. But what ends up happening is, of course, he is hit by Luffy's attack, and he doesn't dodge. He's like, no, I'm going to take this attack head on. And he ends up falling, gets hit, falls through the giant hole that got put in Wano, through that, into the volcano, where he lands in the lava chamber, like right next to Big Mom. And that's technically the last time we see them. We know that the volcano does erupt, and that they supposedly, presumably, get erupted out of the volcano, caught in the eruption. But we have not seen them since. We haven't. I mentioned this in the Big Mom videos when I went over this. We have not seen them since. We don't know if they are dead, alive, in coma, perfectly fine, cyborg, half melted, whatever. We don't know. That has not been shown to us. We have not seen them since. It may be something where Oda kind of leaves it, ambiguous, just in case he decides to bring them back. I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. It's like, the thing is like, the whole legacy that gets thrown in here at the moment is like, Big Mom and Kaido get defeated here on Onigashima. And, the aftermath of that is like 2 of the previous 4, sets of 4, the Yonko that have been around for so long are now gone. And Whitebeard's already gone, so Shank's the last one left from the 4 original Yonko that we find out about. And then now it's going to be shifted around, where now it's Shanks, Blackbeard, Buggy, and Luffy that are the new Yonko at that point in time. Or the new Yonko. And, it's because Big Mom and Kaido were defeated. But we don't know if they're gone yet. And that's the thing, is like, Luffy doesn't want to kill his opponents. Yes, he's probably killed various Marines or various bystanders at some point in time. Not so much like innocent bystanders, but like Marine bystanders at various points in time. Or like when he was in Impel Down. Sure, people have died probably that way. But Luffy doesn't intentionally kill people. Kaido would have been one of those people. I wouldn't have been surprised if Luffy tried to intentionally kill him. And down the line, depending on whatever the heck happens with the Gorosei, or whatever the heck happens with the God's Knights, or Emu, Luffy might be like, no, I intentionally want you dead. Because that's the only way to defeat you, so I intentionally want you dead. But, again, we'll see how that happens. We'll see what happens there. But that's what we have for Kaido. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.